Invictus, my kings, welcome to a comparison of the Julii, Brutii, and Scipii families in Rome Total War and Rome Total War Remastered. Which Roman faction is the best? We will go over all of the minuscule and gargantuan minutiae of all of the factions and decide which Roman faction is, finally, and once and for all, the best. Alright, so starting off with the Julii, and naturally with the Julii you want to expand into the Gallic lands, the barbarian lands. It is essentially what the Senate asks you to do. It is the natural course of expansion, and this presents a unique set of challenges for the Julii that is a little bit different from what the Brutii and the Scipii have to face, is that while the military conquest side of things will be relatively easy, and thus I believe the Julii are actually the best faction to really learn the game with, while that is going to be simple, what isn't going to be simple is then maintaining a good economy, because while these lands are easy to conquer and their barbarians don't really have the best armies, your early game armies are by far superior completely to what the Gauls, the Britons, the Germanics, even the Iberians have to wield against you, even in the early game and especially in the late game. While you are militarily much superior to them, once you conquer these lands, much of them are going to be extremely underdeveloped and they will have low population. They are inland cities, so there isn't going to be a lot of opportunity for trade. There isn't going to be a lot of opportunity to take advantage of docks, or ports more rather, and there isn't going to be a lot of opportunity to naturally grow these settlements. Now, the Julii do have the advantage of their pantheons and their, well, religious buildings in general, providing more population growth, which is supposed to offset this sort of penalty. However, this means that once the civil war against the other Roman factions start, you are going to be at a severe military disadvantage, because while you are essentially just catching up to the growth and the richness and the wealth and everything that the Brutii and the Scipii have to acquire and will acquire while going against their natural enemies, you are going to be militarily disadvantaged because your raw recruits are going to be, well, raw recruits. You aren't going to have a lot of opportunity to have extra experience, extra morale, extra weapon damage, extra anything. Your raw recruits are going to be raw, whereas the raw recruits of the Brutii are going to have extra experience and morale, and the raw recruits of the Scipii are going to have extra weapon, light and heavy weapon damage. They're going to have extra armor and are going to dominate the seas. So you are essentially hampered by the lands you are supposed to expand into. Now, roster-wise, compared to the other Roman families, the Julii are essentially the same as all the others. The only difference is in the gladiators that they wield, and those are sort of inconsequential at all, completely. So you don't really have to worry on that front. But in general, the Julii, the AI does the best. When playing as the Julii, the AI definitely does the best because they expand into easy-to-conquer lands. But then once the Roman Civil War hits, they definitely don't do the best because, well, they don't have access to such high military equipment compared to the Brutii and the Scipii. They just don't do as well militarily. And so while for the early game, they are probably the easiest and most noob-friendly, when it comes to the late game and facing off against the other Roman families, they definitely don't do as great. And when it comes to the military, they are also hampered by the mercenary choice that they have on offer when it comes to Gaul, Germania. The mercenaries just aren't that great. They're essentially just barbarian units, which aren't really all that superior compared to what you're already wielding. You don't have any great cavalry options. You don't have a lot of great archer options or ranged unit options. There just isn't a lot to really compensate for the deficiencies that you have. It's just trash that you already can recruit better versions of. So the mercenary stuff is just completely out of the question. Next up are the Brutii, and the Brutii have a very interesting early game because, well, yes, you have Apollonia and another rebel settlement that is easy to access and has easy access into the Greek peninsula. You actually have to chew through the Greek city-states and Macedon, and they have a lot of phalanxes. You will be really great at facing phalanxes once you're done with the Brutii campaign. You will know your stuff. And so the Brutii definitely aren't as noob-friendly or as new game or as new to the game player friendly. However, you are expanding into really wealthy settlements that are already built up, have a lot of population, have sea access, you can take advantage of trade, you have all the monuments dotted around Greece, all the wonders of the world, more rather, which you can take advantage of very easily. You will become the richest Roman faction in no time. It will become the most powerful Roman faction in no time. The mercenaries on offer are really good. They have the Cretan archers are some of the best. Rhodian slingers are some of the best. You will have easy access to really good archery units. Some really decent offers of hoplites as well. And not the best cavalry on offer, to be honest. You won't have the access to some of the best cavalry in the game. However, your hoplites are meant to counteract that, and your archers are meant to counteract horse archers. So you'll have a really easy time going into the eastern lands and actually expanding properly once you chew through Greece. Chewing through Greece is one of the most important factors into any going into any Brutii campaign. You really should have a plan on how to deal with it. Do you first face the Macedonians and then the Greeks, or first the Greeks and the Macedonians? You will have to chew through a lot of hoplites. You will have to go through a lot of very experienced generals and armies. However, once you manage that, you will become unassailable, and your pantheons do give you a lot of good military bonuses. They give you extra experience and extra morale. And so your army, even once the Roman Civil War hits, you will have a lot of options, a lot of good, really solid units. Now, experience isn't as valuable as what the Scipii have, which have light and heavy weapons and heavy armor, I believe. So you won't have as easy of a time recruiting just raw recruits. However, experience and morale goes a long way when it comes to facing off against other Roman armies. And thus, I believe the Brutii are a strong contender to be actually the best and by far the wealthiest, Roman faction. Now, next up are the Scipii, and the Scipii definitely have the most difficult early game out of all the Roman factions. They don't have any rebel settlements that they can easily expand into, so they are a complete opposite of the Julii. They have Lilybaeum, which is Carthaginian, and they have Syracuse, which is owned by the Greek cities. Now, after you conquer Sicily, you are meant to go after Carthage and really hop into North Africa. But for this, you will need a strong navy. Now, luckily, the Scipii have some of the best naval units in the entire game, but that comes way later in the game. So for the early game, you will really have to dabble into countering phalanxes, countering elephants. You will have to dabble into actually getting into a good navy. You won't have as easy conquest as the Julii. You won't be conquering as rich settlements as the Brutii. However, you will have to chew through Sicily at the beginning. Now, once Lilybaeum is captured and once you have repulsed the Carthaginians, the expansion into Carthage proper isn't actually going to be as difficult as it seems. Carthage rarely has a large army garrisoned, and North Africa is relatively easy to conquer. However, North African settlements really aren't that wealthy compared to Greece, for example. They really aren't that wealthy. It takes a long time to actually get from one North African settlement to another, excluding Carthage and its surrounding Carthaginian settlements. So going into Numidia and possibly even Egypt means that you really will have to have a lot of good transport ships ready and willing to support you. So you will have to waste money on actually getting a good navy, which will hamper your campaign to a certain degree. Not completely, but it's not going to be as easy or as simple as the Julii or the Brutii. Now, your temples. Your temples are by far the best military-focused temples in the entire Roman roster of temples and religious buildings. You also have the Pantheon of Neptune, or the Temple of Neptune, which allows you to get some really good navy units, some really good ships. So you will have a really clear advantage when it comes to actually dominating the Roman Civil War. However, what is going to be difficult is actually getting to the Civil War with a large enough territory so that the Julii don't just overwhelm you with numbers and the Brutii don't overwhelm you with their experienced troops. So the Scipii are probably in second place, I would put them, where the Roman Civil War is going to be definitely a set of challenges and opportunities for you to really experience what it's like actually waging a Roman Civil War, as the point of a little bit of disadvantage. But you definitely have your strengths and your weaknesses, and I would suggest that the Scipii are actually meant to be played by some of the most experienced players in when it comes to Rome Total War. You aren't really meant to play the Scipii as your first campaign. That goes for the Julii. I would suggest that the second campaign is meant to be played as the Brutii, and then lastly and in third place you are supposed to place the Scipii as the last Roman faction that you really go into. So I would suggest that you have to be actually quite experienced to get the Scipii off the ground, and it's not as simple as with the Julii, for example. Now, in my personal opinion, obviously the Brutii are the best. You're expanding into some of the richest territory, some of the most developed territory there is in Rome Total War, and your temples provide a good enough buff for the Roman Civil War to actually give you a solid advantage. And more money means more armies, so you can really swarm your enemies with a lot of experienced troops, and it's going to be a breeze. And I would say that the Julii and the Scipii are about the same when it comes to a general comparison. They are very different when it comes to their early games and their mid games, to be honest, but I would weigh them about the same, honestly, with the clear difference that the Julii are meant to be played by a new player to the game, so you're supposed to play as the Red Romans first, and the Scipii as last, so you're not really meant to play the Scipii as your first Roman campaign. Well, anyway, thanks, Kings, for watching. Hopefully enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.